in the NHS here in England are getting more and more sophisticated NHS digital services.
Dr. Sullivan.
Question 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is investing an extra £26 billion in the NHS, opening up community diagnostic centres at evening and weekends and delivering 5 million more appointments to catch cancer earlier. We are making progress. Already 135,000 more patients have had cancer diagnosed or ruled out within the 28-day target compared to the previous year. A lot done and a lot more to do.
Sullivan.
A local teacher went to her GP with clear symptoms of a facial tumour that told it was simply the effects of age. It took almost 2 years to receive a confirmed diagnosis, including 8 months lost in the system after an urgent referral. Does the Minister agree with me that reducing time for cancer diagnosis must start with strengthening systems to support early recognition and follow-up, and that no one is left waiting? And can I also add, and I wish the Minister well with her own cancer battle, and thank her for bravely sharing her experience of living with cancer.
I thank her for her question and her well wishes. We are taking cancer detection seriously in general practice, and there is work to do. It's why we've recently launched Jessie's Rule. It's a patient safety initiative that means when patients return 3 times with worsening or undiagnosed symptoms, GPs must reflect, review and rethink. And that could include a second opinion, episodic continuity of care, ordering additional tests. And I wish her constituent the very best, and I offer her my sympathies in her diagnosis.
Blanche.
Mr. Speaker, the government claims that it wishes to reduce NHS waiting times, but I have written confirmation from this government that they have slashed funding for community diagnostic centres. The consequences of Labour's funding cuts means that brand new facilities such as those at Queen Mary's Sidcup, which I secured £9.6 million of funding from the last Conservative government for, can now only open 2 days per week. Will the Minister urgently review this funding cut so that more patients in Bexley and across the UK can actually get their diagnostics quicker? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. However, I think you might be mistaken. We are opening more CDCs than ever before. I've lost count of the amount of CDCs we've been invited to open, and we're making sure that people have got access to diagnostics in their community, from hospital to community, with the most access that there has been for some years.
Katie Lamb.
Question number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the decisions taken by the Chancellor at the budget, we are investing an extra £1.1 billion in general practice, the biggest funding increase in a decade. That funding has allowed us to recruit an extra 2,000 GPs, agree a contract for the first time in 4 years, and introduce online access. I wonder whether the honourable member would welcome that investment, or would she cut it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. GP surgeries across the Weald of Kent, including in Woodchurch and Charing, tell me how much they struggle with rising staff costs. The national insurance increases in last year's budget put huge pressure on them. So can the honourable gentleman please tell us, alongside the investment that he's just mentioned, what discussions he or his health colleagues have had with Treasury colleagues about protecting GP partnerships from further NI burdens in the upcoming budget?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I do find it extraordinary that members opposite have the brass neck to raise these kind of questions. Mr. Speaker, they created the mess, and now they're criticising us for not. It's a bit like the arsonists heckling the firefighters, Mr. Speaker. Now, patient satisfaction in general practice has risen from 67% last year to 75% this year, and the proportion of patients reporting difficulty contacting their practice has fallen from 18.7% in July 24 to 10.6% in May 2025. We are just getting started, Mr. Speaker. I didn't hear the honourable lady welcoming the investment.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is committed to improving survival for blood cancers, including acute myeloid leukemia. We're raising awareness, delivering more research and improving early diagnosis. Blood cancer is the 3rd biggest cancer killer and the 5th most common cancer in the UK. It's why we're committed to developing a national cancer plan with patients at its heart, covering the cancer plan from referral and diagnosis to treatment and ongoing care, which, having consulted with key stakeholders and patient groups, I can confirm will be published now early in the new year.
Sir Gavin.
thank the Minister for her response. My constituent, Ruth Wake, who lives in Brood, was tragically diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia in January last year. She's gone through chemotherapy and she's gone through a stem cell transplant. And while she's made good progress and she is in remission, sadly the stem cell transplant has failed. Now, under the current rules, if it fails, and it's after 9.5 months it's failed, if it fails under a year, she can't have a second stem cell transplant. Now, I know the pressures that the Minister is under in terms of her time, but my constituent has so little time. Could the Minister look at this case in particular, but also look at the NICE guidelines, because they were last written over 12 years ago, and science and treatment has moved so rapidly, and I wonder if the Minister could look at both of these points.
I thank him for his question and offer my best wishes to his constituent Ruth in her treatment, and I thank him for bringing her story to my attention, and I really do appreciate, perhaps more than most, the urgency of the matter. While I'm unable to comment on individual cases, I do understand that one of my ministerial colleagues is writing to him directly in the very near future on this matter.
Peter Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, we learned of the incredible results of the Galleria trial, allowing the early identification of many tumours by looking for the DNA circulating in the blood. Indeed, I was myself a volunteer in this trial. So will the Secretary of State join me in recognising the central importance of medical research?
I thank him for his question. Absolutely, I will join him in that. The new progress, particularly around circulating tumour DNA, is really interesting, and we are moving forward with more investment in research so that we can bring forward more such treatments.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Question number 11.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take questions 11 and 13 together. We strengthened the NHS front door with £1.1 billion for general practice, the biggest cash increase in over a decade. We promised to recruit an extra 1,000 GPs in our first year. We recruited 2,000. And patients are now able to request appointments online, a huge step in delivering our manifesto commitment to end the 8 a.m. scramble.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Great Western Park has added 3,000 homes to Didcot in my Oxfordshire constituency, and Valley Park under construction will add 4,000 more. Yet, the new GP surgery promised in 2008 remains a barren patch of land, and existing facilities can't cope. The Integrated Care Board is supportive, but progress has stalled due to NHS England's involvement. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that integrated care boards should have the authority to direct primary care funding? And will he meet with me to help unblock the new GP surgery my constituents desperately need?
Let me come back to the honourable gentleman after I've found out what's gone wrong in this case, because, as he points out, ICBs are responsible for commissioning, planning, securing and monitoring GP services within their health system throughout delegated responsibility from NHS England, and capital is allocated to ICBs on a basis that takes account of annual population growth. I can understand his frustration and his constituents, so let me find out what's gone wrong and come back to him.
Welsh.
After 14 years of a Conservative government, poor access to GPs is something we have come to know well in certain areas of my constituency of Sherwood Forest. In Hucknall, demand for GPs is overwhelming to the point that one practice has had to close their online appointment system. Promises of a super healthcare system were made by the previous government, but it was never delivered. Meanwhile, local Ashfield independent politicians have disgracefully used it as a political football. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that there has been far too much talk and not enough action, and it is now time that both the Integrated Care Board and Ashfield District Council deliver on this?
Well, it's of no surprise to me that my honourable friend raises yet another example of Conservative broken promises, and of course all the hot air that comes from independents who have all of the luxury of being commentators but none of the responsibility of ever having to deliver anything. I can assure her that I'd be happy to meet with her to look into what's gone wrong here. This has gone on for far too many years, and I can well understand her frustration.
Ian Lavery.
Question number 12, sir. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let me be clear. This government will always protect the NHS and have it as a service free at the point of use for everyone. This government is determined to shift health out of hospitals and into the community as set out in the 10-year plan, and neighbourhood health services will be fundamental to delivering this shift, and it's right that we look at a range of options to provide the best care for people across the country. But let me reassure the honourable members in the House that all proposals are subject to robust value for money assessments to ensure taxpayers get the best possible return on investments in our health services.
In Labour.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Might I begin by congratulating the Secretary of State for his actions and trying to repair our cherished NHS following 14 years of Tory destruction. But we must learn from past mistakes, and PFI was a huge, expensive mistake. It was an absolute disaster. £80 billion repaid for an investment of £13 billion. Can the Minister please reassure the House that the lessons of PFI have been well learned and are well and truly in the past and in the dossier?
First for his encouragement and congratulations, and let me absolutely reassure him that lessons have been learned and we will ensure value for taxpayers' money on all future proposals.
Pippa Halen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I meet regularly with the GPs in my constituency of South Cambridgeshire, and what they have highlighted to me is their concern that they don't yet have clarity or certainty about the role and resources they will have in the rollout from hospital to community and the neighbourhood health areas. And so will the Minister meet with me to be able to provide that for our GPs so that they will be at the table in the rollout of this, our GPs?
Well, I thank her for her question. It is absolutely the role of her local ICB to make sure that they involve all partners and particularly primary care in the exciting rollout of neighbourhood health service, which I think they welcome, and I'm happy to discuss that further with her.
Richard Bergen.
Number 14, Mr Speaker.
From bench.
As well as a record investment that we're putting into the NHS, we are making sure that we get a better bang for taxpayers' buck. Under the Conservatives, the NHS, for example, is paying £3 billion to recruitment firms for agency shifts, and we've cut agency spend by a third, and we're abolishing it altogether with the savings reinvested in staff pay and treatment for patients. That's just one example of how our reform agenda is good for patients and for taxpayers.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. PFI deals did do huge damage to NHS budgets. Despite receiving just £13 billion in assets, NHS trusts were saddled with over £80 billion in PFI debts, most of that still being paid back. We've even seen some hospitals spending more on PFI debts than on medicines. So if it really wants to cut out waste and to avoid a PFI-style disaster 2.0, can the government rule out using private finance for the new network of new NHS clinics, as has been floated?
Minister.
As I answered in response to my honourable colleague, we will absolutely make sure that we learn the lessons of previous failure on behalf of the last government.
Jim Farrell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would the Minister agree that it is completely wasteful to make cancer patients who need to go for chemotherapy, let's say in Carlisle on a Wednesday, who live in Kirkby Stephen, have to travel the day or the day before up to Carlisle again to get their bloods taken? Why? Because the local hospital trust will no longer fund the local GP surgery in Kirkby Stephen or Appleby to take those bloods there. Isn't it wrong that those GP surgeries can no longer provide secondary healthcare blood services within their own settings, within people's own communities?
The honourable gentleman, as he often does, highlights in his own very rural constituency some of the fundamental problems that are broken at the heart of our NHS. That is why we are both reforming it, but also making sure that we move health services from hospitals into the community, developing neighbourhood health services, and also looking at the financial flows in the system that lead to these sorts of perverse incentives and funding arrangements that do the damage to his constituents as they do to many others. And rural and coastal communities, that's why we highlighted that in the 10-year plan, and it's those sorts of examples we need to see the end of.
Question Bray.
Number 15, please, Mr Speaker.
Stop.
Mr Speaker, we have already made excellent progress turning commitments in the Women's Health Strategy into tangible action, delivering 5.2 million extra appointments, which includes tackling gynaecology waiting lists. We know, though, more needs to be done for women experiencing the menopause, improving awareness and access to treatment. Menopause Mandate have long campaigned for the menopause to be included in the NHS health check, alongside many members in this House. I hope to be able to say more soon, but rest assured we have heard those calls.
Josh Dewberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much thank the Minister for that response. Earlier this year, a constituent came to speak to me about shortages of the one HRT drug which was working for her after years of misdiagnoses and ineffective treatments. She told me GPs often recommend alternatives that cause adverse reactions and have very low awareness of menopause, leaving her and many other women paying for private advice and treatment, as well as taking time off work. So could the Minister update the House on what the Department is doing to address HRT shortages and improve training for GPs so millions of women get the support they need?
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this crucial issue. There are over 70 HRT products and the majority are in good supply, but we are aware of shortages affecting certain estradiol patches and we are engaging with suppliers to expedite deliveries wherever we can. Mr. Speaker, we've issued guidance to healthcare professionals under the serious shortage protocols and methodology to enable community pharmacists to supply alternatives where appropriate. Furthermore, we're committed to funding research into women's health and have invested approximately £5 million through the NIHR scheme into menopause research, including studies for new treatments to improve outcomes for women experiencing the menopause.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's being reported in the press this week that women are being exploited by a menopause gold rush enabled by the tech giants like Instagram. What steps can be taken to make sure that women have access to the very best of information and that misinformation on the internet is got rid of and brought under control?
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting that issue. Mr. Speaker, the best way to do this is to beef up NHS digital services, as we're doing to the NHS digital app, so women and all patients can have confidence in the advice that they receive.
Sheriff.
16, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome the Honourable Lady back from parental leave and greatly look forward to working with her again. Virtual wards allow patients to get hospital-level care in the comfort of their own home, speeding up their recovery while freeing up hospital beds for patients who need them most. We're rolling out virtual wards further so they become the norm for managing many conditions at home.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, I visited the Hospital at Home team at the JR, which is an incredible virtual ward. I saw for myself them deliver care to Mavis, who's 91. She was so grateful and emotional for the work they did. We all ended up in tears. But imagine then my disappointment that while I was off, we got an email from the team saying that the funding for this incredible service is no longer there and that they face closure. This is an example of the best of the NHS. We want it rolled out to the rest, but if the funding isn't there for these nascent services to find their footing, then how can we ensure that that can be spread across the whole of Oxfordshire and beyond?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady makes a very valid point. This is about the shift from hospital to community, and we've got to drive that forward. In September 2025, there were 12,522 virtual ward beds available. That is an increase compared to 12,497 in September 2024. So slowly but surely we are increasing the number of virtual ward beds and capability, but there is still a long way to go, and I absolutely accept the point that she makes.
Just Athwell.
Question 17, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Darzi investigation found that NHS resources are too focused on hospitals at the expense of community care. Our reforms will turn the NHS into more of a neighbourhood health service. We have already recruited an extra 2,000 more GPs. We're rolling out 700,000 extra dental appointments, and we have agreed a new contract of investment and reform for community pharmacy. As part of our 10-year plan, we will be rolling out neighbourhood health centres across the country, starting with the places in the greatest need.
Josh Athwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his answer and for the brilliant work that the whole team is doing to put the NHS 10-year plan into action. Transforming care into the community will give many more patients quick and easy access to specialist care when they need it. However, for people with Parkinson's, access to Parkinson's nurses who are worth their weight in gold remains deeply unequal. Too often patients are left without nurses and having to travel far to see the specialist nurse. Worse still, few Parkinson's nurses who are available are predominantly funded by Parkinson's UK. Can the Minister set out what steps are being taken to increase equitable access to Parkinson's nurses across the country?
Well, I thank him for that question and congratulate him on the campaigning work that he's doing on this issue. Regular support and advice from a Parkinson's disease nurse specialist is highlighted as a key intervention in NICE's guidelines on Parkinson's disease in adults. The forthcoming 10-year workforce plan will support the 10-year health plan by addressing workforce shortages and skills gaps. This will be crucial for delivering quality and accessible care for those with Parkinson's.
Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, ironically, getting care out of hospitals into the community very much depends on a functioning hospital. I met last month with the Group CEO of Hull University Hospital NHS Trust following news that it had been placed into segment 4 of the NHS Acute Trust League table. She acknowledged the urgent need for improvement, expressed clear ambition for change, but she won't be able to deliver the transformation of that important hospital alone. I wonder whether I could meet with the Secretary of State or Ministers to discuss what more can be done to support that hospital on its road to transformation and improvement.
I thank him for that question. I'm not familiar with the details of that case, but if he wouldn't mind writing to me, I'd be very happy to take that issue forward. He is right that there is a mountain to climb, not least because of the mess that was left to us by the previous governments. But we are climbing that mountain step by step. The 10-year plan is a big step in the right direction. It is now all about delivery, and that is what we are doing every day.
Right, we now come to topicals. Gurinder Singh Josam.
Number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since I last answered questions in this House, the Government has announced £500 million for a fair pay agreement for care workers, NHS Online, the first ever online-only hospital trust, and £80 million for children's hospices. We've announced an independent inquiry into maternity services in Leeds, introduced Jess's rule, implemented online requests for GP appointments, opened the 100th CDC, made the chickenpox vaccine available on the NHS, and published NHS league tables. A lot done, Mr. Speaker, a lot more to do.
Gurinder Singh Josam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we promised 2 million more appointments. We've delivered 5 million. 2,000 extra GPs, 6,500 more mental health workers, 7,000 more doctors, 13,000 more nurses and midwives to cancer diagnosis standard met, GP satisfaction up, waiting list down, and a brand new hospital, the Midland Metropolitan University Hospital, opened in my constituency. So does the Minister agree with me that this is the difference a Labour government brings, and we're only just getting started?
Well, why stop there, Mr. Speaker? 15,000 more home adaptations for disabled people through the Disabled Facilities Grant, 135,000 more suspected cancer patients receiving a diagnosis on time, over 200,000 cases off the waiting list, £500 million for the first ever fair pay agreement for care workers, the biggest uplift in carers allowance for a generation. The Tories didn't do it, reform would undo it. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Shall the Secretary of State?
Speaker, let me say first of all it's great to be in this new role, and I genuinely want to say that I want to be part of a constructive opposition, but equally do my role in holding this government to account. Now, I note the lack of detail in the Secretary of State's answers on reorganisation. So can I ask the basics again? How many people will be made redundant? What will it cost? And who is paying?
Well, can I welcome him to his place, Mr. Speaker? It's good to hear from the Conservative front bench. I'd almost forgotten they existed. And, Mr. Speaker, they created a complex web of bureaucracy. It's a bit rich to complain we're not abolishing their creation quickly enough. We've had a number of expressions of interest for voluntary redundancy across my department, NHS England and ICBs, and we're working through that as we speak.
Stuart Andrew.
So, Mr. Speaker, again, he can't answer. His answers are too vague. The Secretary of State is very good at making promises, but the facts are he's presiding over a reorganisation that has stalled, creating uncertainty for staff, waiting lists up 50,000 in the last 3 months, hospices in crisis because of national insurance contribution rises, and we have had strikes again despite big pay rises and the threat of more. Mr. Speaker, if he wants the leadership in the future, perhaps he should show leadership in the NHS now and tell us not just the plans, but when he will give the details and how is he going to deliver on his promises to patients.
Mr. Speaker, waiting lists are lower now than when Labour took office, and that is a stark contrast with the record of the government that he served in, where waiting lists increased every single year they were in charge. This is the first year in 15 years that waiting lists have fallen. That is the difference a Labour government makes. We're only just getting started. And as for leadership changes, we all know why they're calling the Leader of the Opposition Kemi Kazi.
Shubert Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A Channel 4 Dispatches documentary recently went undercover an ambulance centre in my constituency of Gillingham and Rainham. It showed exhausted staff working under very difficult circumstances, the result of years of Tory neglect and mismanagement of our NHS. Does my right honourable friend agree that after the chaos under the last government, this administration will put staff and patients first? And will the relevant minister come to my constituency to meet with healthcare providers and discuss our local challenges?
I thank her for her question. We know that urgent emergency care response has been low, high standard. We're absolutely committed to supporting Ambulance Trust to continually improve patient experience. And the urgent emergency care plan for 25-26 is backed by nearly £450 worth of funding. I'm very happy to discuss this further with her.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Every year we come and discuss the winter crisis in the NHS, but this summer saw record waits at A&E, with more than 74,000 12-hour trolley waits in June and July, something that used to be unheard of. With winter looming and the potential for the A&E perma-crisis to be even worse this year, what package of emergency measures is the Secretary of State putting in place to ensure that patients aren't left to suffer on trolleys or worse in our hospital corridors this winter?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is absolutely right to point out that the NHS is already running hot ahead of winter. We brought forward our winter planning for this year to get ahead. We are making sure all NHS trusts and systems have developed plans which have been tested regionally. The flu vaccination programme is well underway. The autumn COVID-19 vaccination began on the 1st of October, and we're driving improvements in urgent and emergency care. This will be a challenging winter. We're not complacent about that, but we're getting the system ready for it.
Marcus Campbell-Sabers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After years watching dentists in Cumbria turn their back on the NHS contract and move those patients that can afford it to private plans, my constituency is now an NHS dental desert. Can the Minister confirm when the Government will publish its response to the consultation on quality and payment reforms and what we can expect to see in it?
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend. The consultation, as he will know, closed on the 19th of August. We're now considering the outcomes of the consultation. We expect to publish a response very shortly. These reforms will better support patients with complex or urgent needs by better incentivising dentists to deliver this care on the NHS.
Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Moya Cole in Hale Green is a shining example of a hospice that does fantastic work in a really tough economic situation. But they really should not be reliant on coffee mornings and jumble sales to fund their most essential services. Liberal Democrat research shows that almost a half of hospices across the UK are planning cuts this year. So will the government commit to properly funding our hospices in the upcoming budget so that they don't need to cut the vital services they provide?
Well, I thank him for that question, but I didn't hear him welcoming the fact that we provided £100 million, unprecedented amount in capital funding, £26 million a year, 80 million over 3 years for children's hospices. We do actually recognise the fact that hospices benefit from being rooted in their communities with amazing charity and philanthropy supporting them. But of course we know the government needs to do its bit as well, and that is precisely what we were doing. I was very pleased to visit Noah's Ark Hospice in Barnet last week and was so pleased to speak with the chief executive there, who warmly welcomed the stability and certainty that the 3-year allocation has provided.
Shozad Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After a decade of underinvestment in our NHS under the Conservatives, I welcome the progress that has been made on reducing A&E waiting times under this government. But there is no immediate fix. Just last month, a coffee shop at the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford was converted into an emergency ward to treat A&E patients. Will the Secretary of State come to visit the hospital to see the continuing issues with corridor care? And will he update the House on what the government is doing to ensure that William Harvey is able to manage vendor pressure and maintain safe quality care?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for bringing this to the House's attention. It is completely appalling for coffee shops to be commandeered as spaces for the care of patients. We won't accept this. I am happy to look at the case he mentions, but moreover, we will be publishing figures on corridor care so that we can hold the system to account and the public can hold us to account to improve the situation that we inherited.
Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Arthur Rank Hospice in Cambridgeshire is losing £829,000 in NHS funding, forcing the closure of 9 beds. That's 40% of their capacity. So does the Secretary of State believe dying patients are better cared for in overstretched hospital wards than specialist hospices? And please don't fob me off with a capital investment. This is about operational costs.
Well, I thank him for that question. As I have pointed out, we are providing unprecedented levels of funding to hospices. There is clearly a challenging fiscal position. I note that the Liberal Democrat manifesto only proposed spending an extra £8 billion for health and care, whereas we have invested £26 billion. So before the Liberal Democrats call for more spending, they should tell us what they would cut.
Richard Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the changes to the GP booking system, but to get a GP appointment on the Isle of Wight in many cases is still very difficult. A large factor in this is recruiting GPs to the island. Will the Minister assure me that he will investigate all options for improving GP recruitment to coastal, rural and island communities like mine?
I thank him for that question. Through a £160 million investment in the ARS scheme, we have recruited over 2,000 new GPs nationwide. But we do recognise the inequities in funding that can exacerbate regional inequalities in access to services. And that's why I've launched a review of the GP funding formula to ensure funding follows the needs of the population. The National Institute for Health and Care Research has now begun the funding formula review, the Carhill formula, which will conclude in 6 months.
And the best objective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hinchinbrook Hospital is one of the few hospitals in Cambridgeshire which is yet to have an electronic patient record system. On the HIM scale, its current level of digital maturity is at the lowest end of the scale. Hospitals within the new hospital programme are required to be at level 5 on HIMSS in line with the National Digital Capability Framework. So what financial assistance will be provided to North West Anglia NHS Foundation Trust in order to facilitate an investment case so that the rebuilt Hinchinbrook Hospital has a modern and enterprise-wide electronic patient record system?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman draws to our attention the appalling state the NHS was left in by the previous government. We are working at pace to introduce EPRs across the system. I'm sure ministers would be happy to look at the case at his local hospital, cleaning up the mess the party opposite left behind.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a migraine sufferer, about once a week I'm afflicted by debilitating symptoms that always include partial blindness and sometimes include numbness in my fingers, nausea, brain fog, sensitivity to light and sound, a pounding headache, or even losing the ability to speak. Heartbreaking for a politician. I'm very lucky, though, that my migraines only generally last half an hour. Others are much, much worse and can last days. What steps is the Minister taking to improve support for migraine sufferers like me?
I thank the honourable member for his question. At a national level, there's a number of initiatives supporting service improvement and better care for patients with migraine. The Getting It Right First Time programme for neurology published a national specialty report making several recommendations in relation to improving recognition and diagnosis of migraine by GPs. Additionally, we've got the Right Care Toolkit setting out key priorities for improving care for patients with migraine, which includes correct identification and diagnosis, and the NHS England establish a neurology transformation programme, a multi-year clinically led programme. So lots.
Thank you. I do like Cristal, but it is far too long for my health.
Speaker, and I refer the House to my register of interest in my role as a serving Norfolk County Councillor. Mr. Speaker, it's now 2 years since the Conservatives in Norfolk oversaw the closure of 2 convalescence facilities, Benjamin Court in Cromer and Grays Fair Court in Cossey, in the member for Norwich South constituency. This is done without public consultation. It's been met with outcry from local residents, and this short-sighted move will only worsen the backlogs at local hospitals and reduce options for my constituents needing extra support. Will the Minister meet me and his honourable friend to discuss how we can ensure that these vital convalescent facilities will not be lost?
Well, I thank him for that, and I don't know the details of that case, but if he would mind writing to me, I can certainly come back to him on it, but it does sound like it's a vital service that needs to be protected.
Jabal MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Secretary of State's list of announcements since the last questions, he failed to mention the appointment of our friend, the member for Glasgow South West, as a minister, particularly looking at life sciences. Without life sciences, without drug trials, we won't see an improvement in the outcome of rare cancers. Can he make a statement on what will be done about rare cancers?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, both to welcome my honourable friend, the Minister, to his place. I'll be honest, he's been a Minister since we came into government, in effect, in any case, so it's very much recognise the work he's been putting in. But on rare cancer specifically, we are determined to do more in this space, working with my honourable friend, with all of the work she's doing, particularly on rare brain cancers, which is much appreciated.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Most young people refer to gender identity services as same-sex attracted, neurodiverse and or traumatised. Looked after children are also overrepresented in this cohort. Is the Secretary of State really comfortable with the children being given puberty blockers, essentially chemically neutering them for the purposes of the Pathways clinical trial?
Mr. Speaker, within days of taking office, I upheld the judgment made by my predecessor. We do need to tread carefully and sensitively in this space. We do need to take an evidence-based approach to trans healthcare in our country, and that's the approach this government will take.
Sarah Smith.
Mr. Speaker, as you may be aware, Reform-led County Council have opened a consultation into the future of care homes across Lancashire, including the proposal to close Woodlands Care Home in my constituency of Hyndburn. Will the Minister agree with me and join me in urging Lancashire County Council not to take forward these proposals to protect those local services that are so well valued, keep care close to the community and with the amazing staff that support our residents in Woodlands Care Home?
I thank her for that question. I absolutely agree. It's been very interesting to see that all the rhetoric of many of these reform councils has come crashing down with the reality of the situation in which we find ourselves. Adult social care plays an absolutely vital role in the shift from hospital to community, and I'm very happy to meet with her to discuss that matter further.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alton and Petersfield hospitals give excellent step-up, step-down and end-of-life care. The Trust is introducing more home-based care, and that is a good thing, but also proposing to close a ward in one of the community hospitals. Will the Minister ensure that there remain sufficient beds, sufficient capacity in our local community hospitals for those patients that need them? Mr. Speaker, in September, Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust reported a step down in immediate care capacity as the primary reason for discharge. For Portsmouth Hospitals, the NHS Trust was 13% lower than the average. Now, as much as immediate care is important, we know from evidence that getting home is better, and that's why we're putting record amounts of money into the Better Care Fund to make that possible.
Clive Efford.
Mr. Speaker, can I draw to the front bench's attention the prostate cancer research report published last week? It busts the myth that a screening programme for prostate cancer would actually cost the NHS too much money. It would focus on those people most at risk, i.e. black men over the age of 45 and people like me who have a history in their family. Would he join me in commending this report to the National Screening Committee?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question and the inequalities he draws our attention to too. We will look at this report carefully. I am awaiting the recommendation of the National Screening Committee. We'll look carefully at that and I'll report to the House on our decision following that.
Sybil Roberts.
Security supply of medical radioisotopes is critical for the treatment of many conditions and also for diagnosis. Is this a responsibility of his department? And does he support Welsh Government's Project Arthur scheme at the nuclear licence site in Trawsfynydd in my constituency?
I thank her for that question. Security supply of supplies obviously of importance to the entire government. My portfolio includes pharmacy, which is a very important part of that. I'd be very happy to meet with her to discuss the matter that she raises further.
Mr. Speaker, in my constituency of Stafford Eccleshall and the Villages, I recently ran a survey which had a whopping 99% response rate in support of an urgent treatment centre in my constituency. Would the Minister agree to meet with me to discuss urgent treatment provision in my constituency?
The Honourable Lady does an excellent job in her constituency. I meet with her regularly on the issues in her constituency. Very happy to discuss the provision of urgent care centres with her.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Greater transparency in NHS data should be used to drive improvement. So what assessment has the Health Secretary made of the impact on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn of being forced to make savings of £18 million this year on the need to reduce waiting times for A&E and cancer, as identified in the league table that he published?
Mr. Speaker, we're putting £26 billion more into the NHS this year, investment that was opposed by the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker. As the chair of the APPG for dyslexia, something I've campaigned on for many years, I remain alarmed at the high number of dyslexic people that still need to use mental health services. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can better serve dyslexic people in Broxtowe and across the UK and consider measures to prevent more dyslexic people from needing mental health services?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for sharing her personal experiences, and I've been delighted to meet her at the time of her.
Jim Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the approval of the planned new dental school at the University of East Anglia. So, what arrangements and incentives will the Minister put in place to keep dental graduates in the poorest served areas, such as my constituency of Waveney Valley?
I thank him for that question. He will have seen that in the 10-year plan we've committed to tie-ins. So once the current cohort is through its studies, new cohorts will be required to be tied in to doing NHS dentistry for a period of time after graduation. I am sure that he welcomes that very important measure.
Eleanor Dolan.
Speaker, Jules Fielder is a young woman from Hastings who has tragically been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer after doctors repeatedly missed the early symptoms. Jules is now channeling her personal tragedy into action and campaigning to raise awareness of early symptoms and wants shops like Boots and Superdrug to use their shelf space to raise awareness. Will the Minister join me in paying tribute to Jules' amazing campaigning work?
I thank her for raising this issue, and I offer my sympathy to Jules and her family and best wishes. And of course, I commend her work to raise awareness. It's really important. And her experience is also one of the reasons why we're rolling out targeted lung screening and starting to use ANI to detect discrepancies in screening as well.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Mr. Speaker, children in Runnymede and Weybridge are waiting on average 2 years to get a diagnosis of autism or ADHD from Surrey and Borders. The Trust is deviating from national guidance on neurodevelopmental pathways, and waiting times are even greater if children need medication. Does the Secretary of State share my concerns, and will investigate the Trust and make sure children and families get the support they need?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend who has some considerable amount of expertise in this field for bringing this to light. He will appreciate he was also part of the last government which let waiting lists run out of control, and he will also appreciate, although I'm unable to directly interfere in ICB decisions, I'm very happy to write to them to ask for an update and update him when they reply back to me.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent's baby, Bran Tunnicliffe, sadly died last year. They shared their experience with me and described the wait for a coroner's report as a lottery, depending on which hospital pathologist and coroner is involved. I know there's a shortage of pathologists in the UK. Would the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss their experience?
Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry to hear that, having experienced such unimaginable heartbreak, the family then have to go through that additional trauma. I'd be delighted to meet with my honourable friend and look at what we can do together with our friends at the Ministry of Justice to improve the experience for families in that awful situation.
Final question, Gregory Campbell.
Mr. Speaker, some progress has been made in the early diagnosis of prostate cancer. Will the Secretary of State undertake to ensure that when further progress is made, which we all hope to see, it will be shared quickly and efficiently with the devolved regions?
The honourable gentleman that commitment. I work very well with my counterparts across Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, regardless of party affiliations, and I think that's a very sensible suggestion.
Point of order, Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned the health team may have inadvertently misled the House. In July, the JCVI recommended that RSV vaccines were so effective they should be extended to all those over 80 and in adult care homes. The Secretary of State reassured this House in July this was accepted as a recommendation and will be in place for this winter. But when I asked today, the Secretary of State said from a sedentary position he delivered on this promise, and the Minister then confirmed this. But government and NHS guidelines still show availability for this vaccine has not been extended. How can I ensure that the record is correct?
And continue the debate, but you certainly put it on the record. Point of order, Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had meant to say at the beginning of my questions I wanted to pay tribute to our former colleague Oliver Colvile, who sadly passed away last night. He served for Plymouth, Sutton and Davenport between 2010 and 2017. He was named by Conservative Home as one of the minority of Conservative MPs not to have voted against the government, something as a previous whip I thought was exceptional. He really was a true gentleman whose eccentricities always endeared him to many, and I'm sure the whole House thoughts are with his family.
Just to say, we all remember Oliver Colvile very fondly. He really was good MP, nice kind of guy to meet. I knew Oliver way before he came in this House. No, we're all saddened to hear it. Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government and this side of the House, can I associate myself fully with the remarks of the Shadow Secretary of State? He was a decent man, a wonderful public servant. We will all share in that. And I'm sure my honourable friends on this side of the House will absolutely follow his example when it comes to following the whip.
Point of order, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Oliver Colvile was loved on all sides of this House, and as we are going to have the 175th anniversary dinner of Lords and Commons cricket, it's worth remembering one of the most famous wickets ever taken, which was in India on live television, watched by tens of millions, when Oliver Colvile bowled and took that wicket, and I've never seen a triumph like it. He'll be much missed, and he was always loved and respected when he was in the House.
Yeah. His brother was the famous Sky cricket commentator, but we're not going to continue that. We're now going to go to the urgent question. We'll let the front bench change over. Now come to the urgent question. Home Secretary Crisfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the urgent question. To ask the Home Secretary to make a statement on the recent criticism of the statutory inquiry into the rape gang scandal.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As stated in my previous statement to the House on the 2nd of September and in my letter to the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday, the Government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated. Central to our response is a statutory national inquiry under the Inquiries Act 2005, which will oversee local investigations with full powers to compel evidence. It will be time limited to 3 years to ensure that victims and survivors receive answers swiftly. The inquiry will examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failures and good practice. The inquiry will work alongside the National Police Operation Beaconport. The appointment of the chair is at a critical stage, and we hope to confirm the conclusion of this soon. Victims and survivors have been at the heart of this process with trauma-informed opportunities to share their views. We've engaged with them on the chair appointment and the terms of reference, which will be shaped by the chair in consultation in public, again, with stakeholders. As widely reported in the media, victims and survivors are meeting prospective chairs this week. Today, in fact. This process, contrary to the reporting, was not managed by the Home Office, but by an independent child exploitation charity, the NWG. We are gathering views to ensure their perspective remains central. We must avoid delays, as was seen in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, and are progressing as swiftly as thoroughness allows. Misinformation undermines this process. Allegations of intentional delay, lack of interest or widening of the inquiry's scope and dilution are false. The inquiry will remain laser-focused on grooming gangs, as Baroness Casey recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This scandal arose because young, mainly white girls were systematically gang-raped, and this was covered up by those in authority because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. So it's all the more shocking that when calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly and their inquiry is descending into chaos. What we have heard publicly is that victims and survivors on the liaison panel have no confidence in the government and no confidence in the inquiry. In the last 24 hours alone, 2 have resigned. Fiona Goddard resigned from the panel saying this: "The secretive conduct and conditions imposed on survivors by the government has led to a toxic and fearful environment with a high risk of people being silenced all over again." And hours later, Elianne Reynolds also resigned, saying the remit of the inquiry had, and I quote, "been widened to downplay the racial and religious motivations behind our abuse." The Minister shakes her head. That is what Elianne Reynolds says. Fiona also raised the issue of Saba Kaiser, who has been acting as a liaison officer on behalf of NWG. Just 2 years ago, Ms Kaiser described calling out the fact the majority of perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage as, and I quote, "destructive, distracting and irresponsible." Given those frankly appalling views and the complaints about them by survivors, will the Minister ensure Ms Kaiser plays no further role? Victims and survivors have also questioned the suitability of former police officers or social workers to chair the inquiry. They do not believe people from the professions which failed them so badly are suitable. So will the Minister accept this feedback and appoint a judge to lead the inquiry? Will the Minister confirm the scope of this inquiry will not be diluted, as both Fiona and Elianne say is now happening, and confirm it will focus on the cover-up of the rape gang scandal because the majority of perpetrators were of Pakistani origin? Finally, Fiona said this yesterday: "I won't be gagged and controlled by the government while they turn this inquiry into a cover-up." So will the Minister apologise to Fiona and to Elianne?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is that he didn't listen to my remarks at all, because suggesting that the government has silenced anybody is that the government has not handled this process. It has been handled by a grooming gang charity, of which he cites and names a victim of crime. And look, what I will say to the honourable gentleman, which he would know if he had done anywhere near the level of work that I have done, is that not all victims and survivors are of the same opinion. They are not one homogenous group of people who all think the same thing, who all want the same exposure, who all want their identities known. And so what I would say is that I have spoken to Fiona Goddard many times, and I will continue that relationship with her, should that be what she wishes. And every single survivor who has been engaged with, of which there have been many, will have different feelings on this subject. With regard to him requiring a judge, Baroness Casey said to this House in the Home Affairs Select Committee she did not want a traditional judicial-led inquiry. She was explicit. And if anyone in this House can find me an institution that didn't fail these girls over the years, including our courts, who took the children away from the grooming gang victims, who criminalised some of them, there is no institution in our country that hasn't failed. We will continue. Today I will meet with many of the victims and get their feedback, and I will continue to progress. With that in mind, I will engage with all the victims regardless of their opinions, and I will listen to those that have been put in the media, that are put in panels. I will always listen, and I will speak to all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oldham has stepped forward to take forward a local inquiry, and it's been waiting to understand what the move to the national inquiry means for its own work. The same is true of victims and survivors, whose bravery and strength in the most difficult circumstances has been truly remarkable. Can I ask the Minister what arrangements are being put in place to ensure that there is a clear front door offering support that is fully independent of councils and police forces? And while local deep dives are clearly important and they are essential, can we have an assurance that if the evidence takes the investigation beyond boundaries for council and police forces, that those will be followed to the fullest?
I will not be chairing the inquiry, so I can only say to him that the terms of reference that will be set, and as I have said, I'm not sure that this is usual, they will be consulted on in public because of the issue of, I have to say, bad faith and a concern about transparency. They will be consulted on. The remit of the inquiry will be decided by the chair, living within those terms of reference. But I have, having been part of various different inquiries or watched from a distance, that no stone will be left unturned, and whoever chairs this inquiry will feel empowered to do what they think is best.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been 4 months and longer since the Home Office announced the National Statutory Inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation. I know ministers will have wanted quicker progress. We on these benches do too. But we still have no chair, no terms of reference, and most importantly, no justice for the victims who have already waited years. And now 2 members of the Victims and Survivors Liaison Panel have stepped down after raising concerns about shortlisted chairs. They seem to have lost confidence in the process before it has begun. The Home Office must listen to and act on the concerns of victims. I know the Minister will agree. It must get this inquiry off the ground. That is the only way to ensure it proceeds with integrity and with the trust of those it is meant to serve. Mr. Speaker, now is the time to prioritise justice and prevention over political point scoring, and I know the Minister will agree with me on that too, because this is an extremely sensitive matter, particularly for the victims. So will the Minister now commit to publishing that terms of reference, along with full details of the inquiry's budget, staffing and a timeline by the end of this month? And if not to that deadline, when will that be published?
I thank the honourable gentleman for both his tone and approach, and what I would say to him is that as per the Inquiries Act, the terms of reference has to be set and it has to be consulted with the chair. The chair is being decided, and the reason it is, I have to say, it isn't taking any longer than the COVID inquiry. It isn't taking any longer than the infected blood inquiry. I think that was 7 months. Each took 7 months from the announcement to the appointment of the chair. And I have to say, I don't remember huge amounts of criticism or bellyaching, because we wanted to get those things right. And actually getting this right means dealing with lots of different stakeholders of victims with different views. And so the process has to follow that the terms of reference has to go through the chair. And so we have already done with victims groups, we have already done some of that work on the terms of reference, but we cannot publish those, which we will do publicly, like I say, until there is a chair appointed. And I will not rush it, because I am going to take note of all of the feedback that I receive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the government announced that it will take parental responsibility away where a child is born of rape. This will protect grooming victims. Children in this country will no longer be the only proceed of crime that criminals can have lifelong access to. Does the Minister agree with me that survivors have been failed for too long by a government that didn't prioritise giving them justice? A party led by a leader of the opposition that did not mention grooming when she had the power to do something about it. Instead, survivors have had to wait for victims and activists to be on these benches and the most fierce of advocates to be at the dispatch box.
I thank the honourable lady, and I think she mischaracterises me as the fiercest of advocates, because she, as a grooming victim herself with a child born of rape, is the fiercest, bravest. I could cry. I feel so proud that what this government did was seek to get her elected. And I have been campaigning for the thing that she has fought for with grooming gang victims for nearly a decade. I met with ministers of the then government and nothing was done. It is because the exact thing that the member for Bolsover has campaigned for was asked for repeatedly and nothing was done. It is because of her and this government that today I am incredibly proud of her and to say that will change.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a copy here of the government's response to the developments last night addressed to the Home Affairs Select Committee, and I have to say that I find this response completely unacceptable. Is the government seriously implying that Fiona and Ellie, who have been disbelieved and called liars by the British state their entire lives, are spreading misinformation about a process that they have been directly involved in? Because that would be a deeply damaging thing for any government to imply. And worse, Mr. Speaker, there is a line in this letter about the government's proposed inquiry in Oldham, which says the government, and I quote, have been in discussions with Oldham Council about the right approach for Oldham. But how can that possibly be right? How can the Home Office discuss the right approach with the very local authorities that they are being investigated? It would be like the Post Office sitting down with the Post Office to negotiate how they should be investigated. So can the Minister explain how the government will be restoring trust right now in this process, given the contents of this letter that the Minister sent to the Home Affairs Select Committee last night?
Minister.
Can I just be completely clear? I'm suggesting that I will listen completely and utterly to the feedback from the victims that were and still are on. That they are not spreading misinformation at all, but his interpretation is a brilliant case in point, because I will be completely honest, the conversation with Oldham is, do we not think it might be better for them just to take part in a statutory inquiry? It is absolutely nothing to do with the idea that Oldham is telling me what to do. And the more people from that side, he can hold up his paper and have a smug face all he likes, but the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely no council in this country who will tell this inquiry where it can and cannot go. I have said that 1,000,000 times from this dispatch box, and yet the same thing gets peddled again and again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know the Minister won't want to comment on individual candidates to chair the National Grooming Inquiry. Can I just put on record that Jim Gamble is a highly regarded police officer with a long experience of dealing with this, and when his leadership of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre proved what a fiercely independent figure he was, with a real track record of tracking down sick paedophiles online and offline. But does she agree that the chair of this inquiry has to be someone who can earn the trust of those who have been let down far too long by those in positions of authority? And can she confirm, as I hope she will, that the inquiry will not shy away from issues of race or class and will follow the evidence wherever it leads?
Minister.
First and foremost, I can absolutely confirm that. And not only that, the Home Office has asked, which was, I have to say, not done before, for police forces across the country to collect data on ethnicity. So absolutely that will not be the case. And with regard, I won't be drawn into, because it's not up to me. Although what I will say about the gentleman that the honourable member has mentioned is that he did resign because he previously, from a previous role, working in this, because he thought the then government wasn't invested enough in child sexual exploitation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the victims of these crimes were vulnerable children who were ignored and who were gaslit and who were dismissed. Two women have now resigned. Two victims have now resigned because of this process and their lack of failure in the process. And yet what I hear from the Minister appears to me to be an aggressive and defensive tone. Yeah. Does she regret the fact? Is she going to listen? Well, is she going? Remember, these people are watching. Is she going to listen to the victims? And does she regret that these two individuals have resigned from the process?
Minister.
I absolutely regret that they have resigned from the process that, funnily enough, actually, in the particular incidents of one of the people, I have had no involvement in it. I do not know who are on the panels of victims. It is entirely independently managed by a grooming gang charity. One of the only interventions was to ensure that some of the voices who I thought deserved to be heard, that their names went forward to make sure that they were included. So I have done that on a number of occasions. Of course, I will listen to them. I'm actually meant to be with them actually right now, I'm meant to be in with those panels of victims, hearing their response right now. And I will absolutely, as I have said, I will take the feedback, both publicly and should they want to speak to me, as I have approached them, of anyone. But of course, I'm always sad when victims feel that they can't take part in a process. Of course I am. What I have to say is there are many different victims and they have many different views. And just because of the ones that we hear publicly, I want to make it clear that there are many different victims and we have to make sure that all their voices are heard equally, whether they are part of the process or not.
Peter Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has reiterated time and time again that victims must be at the centre of an inquiry. Given that, can she tell us what she intends to do to ensure that that aim is fully implemented?
Minister.
Look, from the inquiry, again, while the inquiry is ongoing, that will be a matter for the Chair. However, from the inquiries that I have been involved in that were successful and were victim-centric, there always has to be a system for supporting the victims, both taking part in the inquiry, but also just supporting them with the trauma that might be brought up. And usually those two things are separate. But once again, I am not going to be the chair of this committee. But undoubtedly making sure that victims are protected throughout the process. And should they want to go out and speak publicly, both negatively and positively, about that process, I would absolutely welcome that. People should never be stopped from speaking, but we have to make sure that there is available for support regardless of how you wish to gain it.
Carl Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There should be nothing more precious in the eyes of this Parliament than the protection of children, and particularly those who suffered at the hands of these barbaric individuals. Many of us are parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and this cuts very deep. But I know the Minister cares and is a caring person, but today we need decisive action. And given how one of the victims has walked away from the inquiry, two of the victims have walked away from the inquiry, can the Minister state clearly how she will ensure that a fully independent inquiry can take place and that it prominently includes victims?
Minister.
I mean, all I can say is that the victims I am meant to be getting feedback from right now, that the reason I can't stand in front of you, I could have just gone, in the air and picked out some random judge. I could have done that. We could have done that. But the reason this process, and the reason I can't even say when I will definitely be able to say when the chair is because I am listening to victims' feedback. But again, I have to stress that that process isn't easy. There are difficult dynamics within different within groups of people. There are difficult things being dealt with by the people who we have asked to engage. And so undoubtedly, that isn't uncomplex, and anyone who has ever worked with groups of people who have been wronged and shamed and treated badly would know that the idea that there is a straight line, a simple answer, to tell them that there would be a simple answer would for me to stand here and lie to them, and I am not willing to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for her continued work. All victims and survivors who for too long have not had their voice heard, we need to make sure that is happening, and I'm sure the Minister is making sure that is happening. Can the Minister confirm what resources are available to ensure that survivors are properly supported through the process? And in terms of system delays, we know there are still issues with court delays, we know there are still issues in terms of making sure we go after all the perpetrators. So is she able to give a bit of an update on that and on the J inquiry recommendations? Thank you.
Minister.
I mean, absolutely. I think next week I will be chairing an interministerial group of cross-government government to push through the other recommendations. Baroness Casey actually made 12 recommendations. People rarely speak about any of the others. But she did actually make 12, and this wasn't her most pressing one. Operation Beaconport, the policing one, was actually the one she put at primacy. And as I said in my previous statement on the 2nd of September, the 216 cases that move forward, that work is absolutely ongoing and runs alongside it. And actually, that's where justice will be served in our courts, if only they hadn't been horrendously degraded, that meant that rape victims are waked for years and years.
Sir Gavin Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the thing we all very much agree on is that the voices of survivors have to be at very much the heart of this, and it's worrying and concerning when two of those survivors don't feel as if the process is properly looking after them and making sure their voice is heard. Would the Minister commit to speaking to both Fiona Goddard and Eliane Reynolds to try and encourage them and reassure them that this is a process that really will listen to their voices?
Absolutely, that opportunity has already been presented to them. That I would be more than happy. I know one of them. I don't know another one. That opportunity is always available. One of them has my phone number. So the idea that I don't listen and have not been making myself available. I have tried to keep the process fiercely independent of government intervention, so that process can happen and victims can feel safe in that. But of course I feel sad that this is how it has ended. And actually, I hope this isn't how it has ended, and I will commit to working to make sure that this isn't the end, and my door is always open to them.
Sheila Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2012, a Bangladeshi national was sentenced in my Carlisle constituency for attempting to recruit 4 girls, aged 12 to 16, into prostitution. In his summing up, the judge described how the man's conduct had corroded the foundations of decency and respect by which all right-thinking people live their lives, whatever their ethnic or religious background. Will the Minister take the opportunity to again reassure all right-thinking people that this inquiry will look at everything to find answers, including the role of ethnicity?
Minister.
I will say it again and again. It will not shy away from findings where they are present, and anybody who has actually done the work in this space would know that that is going to be found, as her case in her constituency highlights. There is absolutely no sense that ethnicity will be buried away. And I have to say, every single time when there is some apparently needless delay, even though, as I've said, it took 7 months to put in place chairs for both the COVID inquiry and the blood inquiry, and nobody moaned about that. The way that gets used, the misinformation I'm talking about, is the idea that that's because we want to cover something up. It will not cover things up. We are taking time to make sure that can never happen.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Honourable Lady has been an outspoken champion for the victims and will continue to be so. But she must be concerned that 2 members of the panel have withdrawn, and we understand one of the candidates to chair the inquiry has withdrawn as well. And clearly there is a concern across the House about the fact that institutions that have failed the victims, such as the police, social services, councils, etc., and courts, are all in a position whereby they failed. And therefore, whoever chairs this panel, this inquiry, is going to have full rigour on services that they may have been involved in. And so, therefore, there's a matter of confidence. And can she update the House then on how that inquiry will report back to this House and what scrutiny this House will have over the actions of the inquiry and the terms of reference?
Minister.
I'd like to thank the Honourable gentleman, because he is in somewhat of a unique category of always asking a question that is genuinely, it leads me to further questions that I think are pertinent. How the inquiry will report into here whilst it is ongoing is not necessarily something that usually happens, but if there, look, I will take that away, and if there is an appetite, but all I can say is there is no institution in the country, this one here, that doesn't have skeletons. Do I think all politicians wouldn't be robust in this? No, I don't. I think some would. And I can guarantee that I can point at people, the honourable gentleman included, who would show absolute rigour even against his own. And but there isn't a single, like with ICSA, we had a judge was leading ICSA. They lost the confidence of the victims. 3 people lost the confidence of the victims. It took 2 years. So there isn't an institution that didn't fail these girls. That's the whole point. There is no clean skin, but there are people, brilliant people, people who whistle blew, people who tried in every one of those institutions. And so that is essentially where we are left with this, but I promise rigour, the same way that when I saw what things happening in here, I certainly was rigorous in...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend the Minister for her formidable personal leadership on this, and I'm so proud to sit on these benches alongside other formidable campaigners too. The Minister has reiterated that the inquiry must be trauma-informed, and I know from speaking to victims in my constituency of Aylesbury just how vital this is, that we're cognisant both of the initial trauma that they've experienced, but also of the re-traumatising effects of going through the process of seeking justice for themselves and for others. So can the Minister set out more about how she'll ensure that this trauma-informed approach is woven through the ongoing inquiry?
Minister. I absolutely, as the inquiry sets up, as previous inquiries with very, very vulnerable groups of people, ICSA, that there will have to be things put in place to ensure that people can freely give their evidence, and that will have to be done in a trauma-informed way. And as was number 12 of Baroness Casey's recommendations, was that it would be, that what was needed for all of the recommendations would be fully funded by the government, and this government has absolutely committed to that. I very much expect that when the chair is in place, those conversations about exactly how that will look will begin. And the only thing I do actually control, I suppose, in any of this is that this government will pay for it.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cover-up continues. We have a Prime Minister who never wanted a national inquiry. We have a Minister who never wanted a national inquiry, and we have the Labour backbenchers who never wanted a national inquiry. So does the Minister agree with me that the victims of these horrific crimes will never get the justice they deserve as long as we have a Labour government in charge?
Minister.
It's quite impressive that you would stand up and say that after a grooming victim stood up and spoke on these benches, but, I've learnt to expect it. When the honourable gentleman stands up and talks about cover-up, I understand that or maybe he's doing it for clicks, I don't know, but I understand that he thinks he's doing, God's work in fighting this. The level of bad faith, the idea that it's easy to find a chair or easy to find people who want to step forward and take part in this process when it is mired in, I have to say, political point scoring like he just did. I have to say, I think that he should really question his own morality.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ellie Reynolds has said that financial dependency has made people stay silent when they should speak, and also alleged that people on the panel were isolated by discouraging contact with each other. I fully understand that the Minister has been extremely clear that this is a fully independent process and hasn't had government involvement. How does she propose to handle, though, the very complex relationship here between how Ellie Reynolds has spoken very clearly about concerns and ensuring that the process does retain the faith of everyone involved?
I mean, as I've said, what I would very much hope to do is hear those concerns directly from Ellie herself and see what can be done. What I also know, because I only know the victims that I know and have worked with before, when they have been on the panel, they speak to me about it like that because I have personal relations with them. What I can say is there are differing views about the levels of confidentiality. Like the confidentiality is not to silence people from speaking about their own experiences. It is because there are people in those rooms who have never shown their face, who are also victims. And for an agency, having run one myself, trying to manage that I can see why perhaps somebody might say, like, you know, you shouldn't like try and seek out the people outside of the meeting, because others might have said, I don't want people to, but they're not going to say that in public. So all of those things I can imagine. I'm trying to get across the idea of how complex these situations are, but I am more than happy to listen to Ellie and see what has gone wrong in the process for her and seek to make it better. I'm absolutely happy to do that.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we've heard what the Minister said about diverse views amongst victims, but is she concerned that some survivors of these terrible crimes have described the process in the terms that they have as a toxic, fearful environment, warning that there is a high risk of people feeling silenced all over again? And what is she going to do to reverse this failure?
Minister?
I mean, I refer you to my previous answer. I'm going to speak to them, which I have said now a number of times, and look into the process, not a process that I have personally been part of. Like I say, I can only speak to the victims who just I happen to have known before, and if they tell me they are on it, not the other way around. I can't ask who is on it. That it is confidential by its very nature. But look, of course I'm going to listen to that feedback, and like I've said, I will speak to those victims involved.
Catherine Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Victims must be at the heart of the grooming gangs inquiry. Does the Minister agree that getting the right chair is absolutely key to ensuring that that happens? And does she agree that we have to avoid the scenes that we saw under the last government, which appointed 3 chairs who then withdrew from the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, an inquiry that took 2 years to start?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady, who I know has some experience of inquiries from her previous life, is exactly right. I look at and people don't remember it now, but there were victims going out in the press complaining about what was going on with ICSA. It went through numerous chairs. There is already much worse faith that exists, both rightly and wrongly in this instance. For me to allow that to happen in this instance would just make people shout, cover up. And so we are trying to do everything that is possible to make sure that those mistakes made by the previous government are not made again.
Finish, Matty.
The credibility of the National Inquiry rests on the voices, experiences and needs of victims and survivors placed at its very centre. Can the Minister show victims in Wales how this inquiry will be guided by their best interests when survivors have such grave concerns that they feel they must resign from liaison of the panel?
I mean, look, I think that to go back to the previous answer, that the chair of the inquiry will set the tone for the inquiry. And that is why getting the right chair and making sure that the system is available for victims who want to take part in the inquiry that will care for them and look after them all have to be in place. But and that, you know, is what we are working to achieve.
Singh Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her responses, and I absolutely agree with her that it's crucial to get this right. So can the Minister be absolutely clear that the inquiry will not be watered down, particularly the focus on grooming gangs and ethnicity, including models of grooming where groomers focused on the ethnicity of victims, whether that be young white girls or even Sikh girls.
Minister.
Absolutely, and I absolutely pay tribute actually to the community response in his local area to recent incidences of very, very hideous sexual violence and put on record my love to the families and victims involved. But absolutely, this is a grooming gangs inquiry, and it will follow what Baroness Casey stated. As I stated in my statement, it will be 3 years long, it will not show away, and it will be a grooming gangs inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I acknowledge the Honourable Lady's commitment to get to justice on this, and I recognise the frustration that she expresses as someone who was responsible for the Infected Blood Compensation Scheme, meeting a diverse group of 40 different charities and representative bodies that didn't agree with one another. However, I would gently and respectfully say to her that we do face a credibility gap on this issue. And I would urge her to examine how she can get ahead with the communications in order that she can continue to demonstrate her commitment to get to justice. Because, frankly, we as members of Parliament have to come to this place when things get into the media and public concerns are expressed. And I understand her frustration, but getting that communications right and maintaining that pathway to delivery of justice is critical.
Minister.
I don't disagree with the honourable gentleman, and if I believed that either most of what I see reported on anything in this space is largely inaccurate and often comes with an agenda, if you will, more so I think than in the case of Blood, but I absolutely recognise and take my hat off to the job that he would have had to have done. But I absolutely recognise that, and there is a balance between wanting to give a complete and utter running commentary on a very complicated thing and making sure that people feel like something is going on, because nature abhors a vacuum and so does misinformation.
Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has heard me many times implore her to move as speedily as possible to address the challenges of victims of this awful crime. But can I on this occasion implore her to take the right time to find the right judge? This is not a normal public appointment. This is someone who has to command the confidence of this House, of the public, and most importantly of survivors, that they will leave no stone unturned, investigate everything, whether it be ethnic, class or institutional, and will make her life harder if they have to. Will she take the time to find the right judge and not repeat what we saw with the child sexual abuse inquiry several years ago?
I absolutely will, and I think he gives me the opportunity to say that no matter who is picked, there will be people who are unhappy with it. Like most politics that we deal with, let's just call a spade and stop pretending that there is a perfect situation. There is the best situation we can have. And funnily enough, in the conversations that I have had with some of the prospective chairs, the main thing I want them to take away is that I want them to feel that if they have to slag me off all day long, and you know what, I'd say the same to the victims, then that is exactly what they should do.
Becca Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister today? She obviously feels very deeply about this, and I think we all agree that anyone that was involved in these awful, horrific crimes must be held to account, and anyone who turned a blind eye, we must also shine a light on that and make sure that doesn't happen again. Can the Minister provide commitments that the inquiry will not be politicised, particularly after multiple local authorities have attempted to block investigations? I think this is a really important question, because we do see this happening. Everyone needs to be investigated on this. It doesn't matter what party you are. This is too important.
Absolutely, 100%. And look, it would far be it from me to sit here and speculate about where I'd like it to go. But let me tell you, if I had my way and I was the chair of this inquiry, it wouldn't. you would not be surprised. I think that, look, where I live is one of the places that I have grave concerns about, because that is where I worked. That it wouldn't stop me wanting to look there if I was the chair, because it has a Labour council. I couldn't, excuse my unparliamentary language, give a toss about...
Can I just say, I'm sorry for the Minister that she felt she had to push it. She's doing an excellent job. She doesn't need to push it. She's better than that. I'll listen to you. No, I'll listen to you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister both for her statement and also for the passion and rigour that she brings to her role, even if sometimes she might say things that she has to apologise for. We greatly appreciate her dedication to the role.
It may help. One of us is going to have to sit down. Actually, I granted an urgent question, so that's the helpful why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Every survivor's experience of abuse is unique. Does the Minister agree with me that by taking the time to find the right chair, they will then be able to make sure that every story will be fully told?
I mean, I really hope so, but I'm not going to do what other people seem to want to do in this circumstance and pretend that there is a guarantee that I have some sort of magic weapon. But that is the process that I am undertaking, is that we get the very, very best chair that is supported and alongside the victims who have been taking part in that process.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Getting this right is both important and extremely difficult. I have two questions for the Minister. If, when she meets Fiona and Eliane, she finds that they're right and there is something wrong, can she tell the House what powers does she have to intervene on that? And my second question is, will the Minister provide assurances that the inquiry will not be staffed, again she might be able to comment on her powers and powers of influence, will not be staffed by individuals who previously dismissed the concerns of survivors and campaigners as racist slurs?
Minister.
So to the first question, I have every power to intervene in the process of how that panel, but the decision that I made was that it should be independent of me and it should be independent of my offices, and that it would be better handled by experts in this field. So, but you know, when I speak to them, of course I can raise those and I can make decisions about how it goes forward. I very much hope that we will be drawing to a conclusion, and that actually my involvement in it soon will be much lesser, actually. And to his other question, victims and survivors of this crime all have different political opinions, all have different views on the substantive. They have different views about whether it should be called grooming, whether it should be called grouped. They have different views on all of these things. I will not stand here and say that I would eliminate any victim or survivor based on their political... any victim or survivor working on this, and I will continue to say that as it is, because of their views, because many of them don't like me very much. Imagine if I just didn't let the people who didn't like me very much not have their voice heard. Well, frankly, I'd be guilty of a cover-up.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. The Minister has made it clear that women and girls were failed by every institution. And it is a positive step forward that the failure is now acknowledged by government, and that acknowledgement is leading to action after years of inaction. But in Scotland, we have absolutely no acknowledgement and absolutely no action. So I want to ask the Minister what advice she would give me and others across Scotland who are becoming increasingly angry that the Scottish Government is doing all it can, not just to block an investigation, but to block any kind of independent scrutiny or case review of organised child exploitation.
I think that the Honourable Lady, first thing I'd say is that the inquiry, whilst is in England and Wales, one of the victims that we have been hearing about today, Ellie, lives very much in the borderland of our two great countries. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that some of the things that may get found in the inquiry will have findings across the border. Unfortunately, the trafficking of young girls does not follow lines on a map as easily as we might think it does when we administer it. But look, what I would say is that you have to continue to work with survivors groups up in Scotland to push for what exactly it is that they want to see in Scotland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister very much for her answers, and I know that the Minister's heart is in this to get justice, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. However, the news that these victims who have already been denigrated and treated as voiceless and worthless during their initial abuse have been made to feel this way once again in this committee. It is difficult to hear, and the Minister will understand that it's also difficult for us to accept that this is taking place on government watch. So will the Minister not agree that the inquiry is not getting this right and instruct immediate action to be taken to give these young women their voice back and ensure that justice is served and safeguards are in place to prevent those from taking place on British soil ever again?
Minister.
I absolutely share his upset and frustration on the matter, and I think that he knows that when I say that I will do whatever I can to ensure that these problems are sorted out where they can be, that is what we will seek to do, and we'll continue to try and do that. But absolutely, what we have to do with this inquiry isn't just look at what went wrong and hold people to account. We have to make sure it cannot happen again.
Sam Carley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say to members opposite that their relentless politicisation of this is no doubt making it much harder to find a chair because it will be putting candidates off. Mr. Speaker, as this inquiry gets underway, we must keep up progress on implementing the recommendations of the J Inquiry, ICSA. I raised concerns at report stage of the Crime and Policing Bill that the government's proposals to implement mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse don't go quite as far as ICSA wanted, and those concerns were raised again in the other place last week by Baroness Gray-Thompson. So will the Minister ask her colleague Lord Hanson to meet me and Baroness Gray-Thompson to discuss how we can remedy that in a way that works for everyone and protects children?
The simple answer is yes, I will ask that. To his first point, absolutely right, is that what we should all seek to be doing throughout this is trying to grease the wheels so that we can have the best inquiry possible. We should all be seeking to do that whilst holding people to account with as much scrutiny as is needed. But I will absolutely do that, and obviously I have met with him a number of times, and getting this right on mandatory reporting is vitally important, and much like in the survivor group, there are different views on either side.
Chris Webb, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Blackpool continues to live with the scars of Charlene Dowes and Paige Chivers, two young girls in Blackpool that never came home but were subject to grooming. Will the Minister confirm to my constituents in Blackpool South that the grooming gang inquiry will be thorough and comprehensive, committed to a full and transparent investigation, ensuring every avenue is examined to uncover the truth?
Minister.
I absolutely will, and funnily enough this morning I spoke to one of his constituents who has been a previous grooming gang victim to assure her of similar things, because I have to say quite a lot of this causes quite a lot of nervousness around and the need to manage lots and lots of different people's emotions, but I absolutely make that commitment to him as I made to one of his constituents this morning, and I make it to this full House.
Okay. Complete. Point of order, Jeremy Corbyn.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Could I invite you to examine Hansard column 652 from yesterday during the exchange about Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters travelling to Aston Villa? In reply to my question, the Secretary of State said she agreed with me about the safety of everyone walking the streets, but went on to say perhaps he might make that point to the people he now associates with on his left and right, because that is not what we've heard from them in the last few weeks. I find the suggestion in that my colleagues have done anything other than say everyone should be able to walk the streets safely in our society, and they were concerned about the danger from football supporters acting in a hooliganistic way at an Aston Villa game. I think the Secretary of State should correct what she said.
Jeremy, come on. Hang on, you're meant to be... You've certainly put it on the record, you've certainly ensured that the correction and your view is there. What it doesn't do is continue as a debate, and you know that as a long-standing member of this House who's got great respect, and I will leave it at that, because you certainly ensured that we're all aware and the correction takes place. Mims Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, and following the points made by my right honourable friend from Salisbury, despite the Minister's best efforts on where she is or isn't involved in terms of this response to the urgent question that you've granted today, I am genuinely more confused, and I think many constituents will be on this. May I ask on this point of order that the honourable lady, despite her saying that she's not looking to create a running commentary on this, would she undertake to update the House clearly to assist on these matters so that we can avoid urgent questions such as this?
Minister.
I'm not sure what she's confused about. A victims panel was set up to look at both terms of reference and to look at the appointment of a chair. There's a variety of different groups of people. Some of them have done both. Some have taken part in just one or the other, usually depending on time and logistics, as you might imagine. These are people. And that has been managed by an organisation called NWG. I have not taken part in those sessions other than the feedback on chairs, because that was said that was what. So the feedback on the chair's appointments comes to me. I don't have to go to that, but I go and sit and listen. And usually that's the first time I know who has been on the panel when they have been interviewing chairs. So the process is entirely managed. I happen, because of my years of experience, to know quite a lot of the people. And so I do speak to some of the people who are on the panel, because they I have personal relations with them and have supported them over the years.
Thank you for that. Okay, that completes the urgent question. Okay, well done.
Which brings us to the 10-minute rule motion. Bradley Thomas.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require a company that meets a specified criteria to report any cyber extortion or ransomware attack on the company to the government within a specified time frame after the attack, to make provision about the content of such reports, including a requirement to provide information about any payments made and for connected purposes. This is a timely and pressing matter. Illegal activity across the nation is on the rise, and cyber attacks are no exception. The National Cyber Security Centre has reported a 50% increase in British cyber incidents deemed highly significant over the past year. Furthermore, of the 429 incidents the NCSC was called upon to assist with, at least half were considered of national importance. Amongst the significant threats identified in the NCSC's 2025 annual review are hostile states such as China, linked to a coordinated campaign involving 3 Chinese-based companies targeting foreign governments and critical networks, and Iran, which the NCSC assessed as a highly likely threat to UK entities. UK IT leaders are understandably alarmed. Research from Armis has revealed that 74% of UK IT leaders cite China and 71% cite Russia as their top cybersecurity concerns. And if that's not enough, recent espionage trials have thrown a harsh spotlight on the scale and intent of state-sponsored cyber operations. The threat is undeniable. We must act with urgency to safeguard UK-based companies and critical infrastructure before these escalating menaces begin to seriously disrupt the functioning of our nation. Under current legislation, cyber attacks need only to be reported in limited circumstances. Namely, operations handling personal data must report cyber attacks that pose a likely risk to individual rights. Essential service operators and relevant digital service providers must disclose incidents with substantial service impact, and a few regulated bodies such as the Financial Conduct Authority and the Solicitors Regulation Authority follow their own cyber incident reporting requirements. Notably, there is no requirement for companies to disclose when a ransomware payment has been made, despite the significant financial burden that such payments can impose. Cohesity's 2024 Global Cyber Resilience Report found that 59% of companies targeted by ransomware chose to pay, with an average cost of £870,000, with some reaching as high as £20 million. The reality is clear. Cybercrime, particularly extortion and ransomware, has outpaced existing legislation. It has allowed dangerous gaps to emerge in our intelligence gathering, gaps that criminals are likely to exploit, and has weakened the defences of our national critical infrastructure against these escalating threats. The Cyber Extortion and Ransomware Reporting Bill seeks to close these gaps and reinforce the UK's resilience against cybercrime. Following Australia's successful implementation so far of a mandatory ransomware payment reporting scheme, it's imperative that the UK follows suit. This bill would mandate any British company registered under the Companies Act 2006 with an annual turnover above £25 million or is responsible for critical national infrastructure to inform the government within 72 hours of becoming a victim to a cyber extortion or ransomware attack, with a further report being required if any payment is made by the company or a third party on their behalf within 72 hours of the transaction taking place. We've all witnessed the shocking headlines. Major British companies under siege from cyber attacks, resulting in severe disruption and millions in lost revenue. From M&S to the Co-op, Harrods to JLR, these attacks have been crippling. And yet the government currently has no legal right to know whether a ransom payment was made to restore their systems. But what if that payment was made to a terrorist organisation? What if it was sent to a hostile state? It is not the fault of the companies who, under immense pressure and with limited options, choose to pay to regain control of their operations. The fault lies in the gaps within our legislation, gaps that allow ransom payments to go unreported, potentially fueling even greater threats against our nation. The proposed threshold of an annual turnover exceeding £25 million, or those responsible for critical national infrastructure, has been carefully considered. It captures approximately 78% of medium-sized businesses and all large corporations, whilst avoiding an overwhelming influx of reports that a lower threshold would trigger due to a high number of SMEs in the UK. National critical infrastructure comprises all 13 sectors defined by the government. That includes chemicals, civil nuclear, communications, defence, emergency services, energy, finance, food, government, health, space, transport and water. This criteria captures the vast majority of companies whose compromise through attack or ransom payment could pose a serious risk to the UK. It also reflects the volume of reports our resources can realistically manage, whilst establishing a clear, accessible threshold so companies aren't forced to navigate complex policy during the stress of an active attack. Another imperative component of this approach is the inclusion of all payment types, whether monetary, intellectual property, and exchanges of gifts or services or other forms of benefits. This broader scope will enable law enforcement to trace criminal networks, identify patterns, and disrupt the flow of illicit funds. It will help to inform better resource allocation, as well as holding the potential to foster collaboration across sectors that would result in faster alerts and stronger resilience. I understand that many companies may have reservations regarding the requirement to report incidents and ransom payments. It could leave them vulnerable to reputational damage from potential leaks and damage their business further. This proposal is pro-business, and that is why robust legal protections would be established to ensure that any reports made to the government remain strictly confidential, with no right of publication unless deemed to be in the national interest. This will give companies the assurance they need to report without fear and the support they deserve to help their recovery. What happens if a company fails to report within 72 hours of an extortion attack or neglects to submit a report following a ransom payment? Quite simply, they would face a civil monetary penalty. Mandated reporting is essential to our national security and collective well-being. Non-compliance must be actively discouraged. It's in the company's interest, the public interest, and it is in the government's interests. The absence of mandatory reporting, especially for ransom payments, leaves a dangerous blind spot in our national security. When companies report these payments, our security agencies gain vital intelligence. Intelligence that helps us understand who is being targeted, how attacks are evolving, and where our vulnerabilities lie before they're exploited. Espionage today is not confined to spies and stolen documents. It's digital, it is silent, and it is relentless. The grey zone exists. Cyber extortion and ransomware attacks are fast becoming the preferred weapon of hostile actors seeking to destabilise our institutions and exploit our vulnerabilities. Their attacks are becoming progressively more complex, often leaving companies with no viable alternative but to make ransom payments. From individual hackers to organised criminal gangs to state-backed attacks from overseas, we can't afford to fall behind in the race of technological defences and expose ourselves to increasingly sophisticated cyber extortion attacks. Whilst I acknowledge that the government referenced the introduction of a cybersecurity bill in the King's speech, it's deeply concerning that despite the urgency of the threat, the bill has yet to even be brought before Parliament. Cyber criminals are not slowing down. Their methods are not becoming simpler. On the contrary, attacks are growing in complexity, scale and impact. And although I recognise that sound policy requires time to develop, we cannot afford to proceed at our current glacial pace. Delay only deepens our vulnerability, particularly in light of recent events. We must act decisively and without hesitation to safeguard British businesses and protect our national security. The choice before us is stark. Either we allow ourselves to become increasingly exposed as criminals outpace our outdated legislation and other nations fortify their defences, or we rise to meet the moment with urgency, resolve and the protections our country demands. It is time for us to send an important message. We will not allow cyber criminals to continue operating in the shadows unchecked and unchallenged.
The question is that the Honourable Member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Tom Tuggendart, Alison Griffiths, Dr Neil Shastri-Hurst, Joy Morrissey, Sakib Bharti, John Glenn, Greg Smith, Ben Obsi-Jekti, Lincoln Jopp, Sir John Hayes, Jim Shannon and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Bradley Thomas.
Cyber Extortion and Ransomware Reporting Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 29th of May 2026.
Friday, 29th of May 2026. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Sentencing Bill Committee.
Order. Order.
Sentencing Bill.
Can I remind members that in committee, members should not address the chair as Deputy Speaker, but please use our names when addressing the chair. Madam Chair, Chair and Madam Chairman are also acceptable. We will begin with amendment number 46 to clause 1, with which it will be convenient to consider all amendments, clauses stand part, new clauses, schedules and the new schedule as on the selection and grouping paper. Before I call the Right Honourable Member for Tatton to move her Amendment 46, I should advise the House that once that amendment has been disposed of at the end of the debate, I am provisionally minded to call the following amendments and new clauses for separate decision. Amendment 24 in the name of the Honourable Member for Bexhill and Battle, new clause 6 in the name of the Honourable Member for Huntingdon, new clause 9 in the name of the Honourable Member for Bexhill and Battle, and new clause 30 in the name of the Honourable Member for Chichester. Esther McVeigh.
I beg to move Amendment 46. Madam Chair, I oppose the whole idea of forcing courts to give suspended sentences when they should be sending offenders to prison. We all know that it is hard to get sent to prison in the first place, and judges and magistrates do not send people to prison lightly. In fact, they don't send people to prison enough, as far as I can see. So being forced to send even less people to prison is extremely worrying. And this is what my amendments seek to try and address today. Now, Madam Chair, we can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, so it won't be possible to transform this disastrous bill into a good one. All we can seek to do today is to make it less bad. But be under no illusion, this bill takes a sledgehammer to our justice system and will dismantle law and order in this country. And to call this bill a sentencing bill makes a mockery of us all. It should be called the Avoid a Sentence Bill. For this bill is a slap in the face to victims and will embolden offenders who will quite literally be laughing all their way to their next crime. First, Madam Chair, I will make a bit of progress and then I will. First, Madam Chair, I want to put on the record my support for amendments in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Bexhill and Battle, and the honourable member for Clacton, particularly in relation to the abolition of the Sentencing Council and the deportation of foreign criminals. But because of time constraints, I will speak to the amendments tabled in my name only. I'll give way to the honourable lady.
Thank you. I thank the right honourable member for giving way. I just want to go back to a point where she suggested this bill is going to bring law and order into question. As a former prison officer myself, I would say that it was a previous government running our prison system to a boiling point that nearly brought law and order crashing down, including having less than 100 bed spaces available last summer, and maybe a little bit of reflection from the party opposite on what they did to His Majesty's Prison Service whilst they were in office and whilst I was serving would be poignant on this debate today.
I'd like to thank the honourable lady for making that point. I'd also like to point out that actually under the last governments, 3 prisons were built, which was HMP Five Wells, HMP Fossway, HMP Millsyke. That was adding an extra 8,500 places, and 3 further prisons will also be built. I will indeed.
The active management of the prison service was, of course, hard work, managing it at those levels of occupation. But that hard work was absolutely necessary and much preferable to simply taking a view that we won't have all those criminals in prison at all. The reality is that what we're doing now is much worse.
I agree with the honourable member. This is a disgrace of a bill that won't be sending people to prison, and at the same time it will be letting people out of prison. So I will start with amendments 46, 47, 51 and 52, and would change the length of sentence that qualify for these get-out-of-jail-free suspended sentences to ones of less than 12 months, as opposed to 12 months or more, and only before any credit is given for a guilty plea. Sentences of 12 months or more are obviously given for more serious offences than those less than 12 months. Also, as the bill stands, I understand those who will be sentenced to 18-month sentence would be appropriate, and they could hit the jackpot after, because they will take into account the credit of a guilty plea. That will reduce it to 12 months, and therefore they will qualify under this bill for a suspended sentence. People don't get sentences of these lengths for nothing, and so I hope the government will reflect on these amendments to reduce the maximum sentence that has to be suspended. Now, I gave a quick scan of my local papers for who had got an 18-month sentence, which could now become a suspended sentence. And this was for a lady who caused unnecessary suffering of an animal and was in possession of a samurai sword. It was also for a lady for glassing a pregnant friend in the face. And another one was for coercion and controlling behaviour, and they also got a 5-year restraining order These could all get suspended sentences now. The bill currently says that the presumption in favour of a suspended sentence need not apply if the court is of the opinion that making the order would put a particular individual at significant risk of physical or psychological harm. My amendments 48 and 53 would extend this to include the public, who are, after all, a collection of individuals, and they too deserve protecting. If the court is concerned that the offender is likely to be a danger to the public, then they should absolutely have the right to ensure they go to prison and not go back into the community on a suspended sentence. Amendments 49 and 54 change the risk level by removing the word significant. I would have thought that any identifiable risk should be covered, as these are people's lives we are talking about protecting here, and we should not be playing a game of Russian roulette with them. Ironically, it seems the Sentencing Council saw things a similar